Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dig into a core economic idea that honestly affects pretty much every single purchase you make: market equilibrium. It really all kicks off with a simple question you've probably asked yourself a million times. Why does stuff cost what it costs? Why is a cup of coffee $3 and not 1 or 10? It might seem totally random, but there's this incredibly powerful logic underneath it all, and we're going to break it down. Okay, so to get a handle on prices, you gotta meet the two main characters in this whole economic story: buyers and sellers. On one side, you have us, the buyers. We want the lowest price, period. On the other side, you have the sellers. They want the highest price possible. This constant tug of war is what sets the entire stage. So how in the world does this get sorted out? You've got these two groups, buyers and sellers, who want the complete opposite thing. How do they ever agree on a single price for anything? Let's dive into the mechanics of it. Let's start with us, the buyers. We're represented by what's called the demand curve. And it's pretty simple, really. It slopes downwards because, well, the cheaper something is, the more of it we want, right? If your favorite coffee goes on sale, you're probably going to buy more of it. That's demand. And then you've got the other side of the coin, the sellers. They're all about the supply curve. And this one slopes up. Why? Well, it's pretty obvious when you think about it. The higher the price, the more profit they make, and the more they're motivated to produce and sell. If the price is super low, it's just not worth their time. Okay, so here is the magic moment. This is where it all clicks. You take those two curves, the one for the buyers and the one for the sellers, you put them on the same graph, and boom, they cross at one single point. This right here is the market's sweet spot. It's the perfect compromise. That spot right there is called market equilibrium. It's this perfect state of balance where everything just works. The amount of a product that sellers want to sell is exactly the amount that buyers want to buy. There are no leftovers, and nobody who wants one at that price goes home empty-handed. The market, as they say, clears. Okay, that's great in a perfect world. But let's be real, when is the world ever that perfect? So what happens when the price isn't just right? What happens when things are out of balance? Well, this is where the legendary economist Adam Smith comes in. He had this incredible idea he called the invisible hand. It's this natural force in a free market that, almost like magic, automatically starts pushing prices back toward that perfect balance point whenever they get out of whack. So let's watch this invisible hand do its thing. Let's say the price for something is way too high, up at P2 on this graph. At that price, sellers are pumped. They're making a ton of stuff, Q2. But for us buyers, nah, it's too expensive. We're only buying this much, Q2. And that big gap between the two? That's what we call a surplus. Just picture a clearance rack overflowing with stuff nobody's buying. So what happens when a store has a ton of unsold stuff? They have a sale, right? Sellers have no choice but to drop their prices to get people interested again. And as that price falls, more of us start buying. And, just like that, the market naturally starts moving back towards that sweet spot. All right, now let's flip it. What if the price is too low, down at P1? Suddenly, it's a bargain. Everybody wants one, right? Demand is way up here at Q1. But the sellers, they're not making much money, so they're not producing a lot, just quantity Q1. And that creates a shortage. This is that crazy rush for concert tickets or the latest phone the day it comes out. And you know what happens then, right? When you have a huge line of people all trying to buy a few items, people start offering more money. The price gets bid up. And as the price rises, sellers get excited to make more, while some buyers decide it's not worth it anymore. And once again, that invisible hand pushes us right back toward equilibrium. So it's pretty amazing, isn't it? This built-in ability for markets to fix themselves. But all of that assumes that the basic rules of the game aren't changing. What happens when some real-world event comes along and just flips the whole table? Let's play this out. Imagine you wake up and see a headline: "New study shows coffee is amazing for your health." What happens? Suddenly, everyone wants more coffee, no matter the price. That shoves the entire demand curve over to the right. And look what that does to our equilibrium point. It moves up to point G. The new price is higher and a lot more coffee is being sold. Of course, if the news was bad, the opposite happens. The curve shifts left and both price and quantity would drop. And this model isn't just for understanding how markets work on their own. It's actually a super powerful tool for seeing what happens when governments decide, you know what, we don't think that market price is fair, and they decide to step in.
A classic move is what's called a price ceiling. It's basically a legal cap, a maximum price that can be charged for something. You see this with things like rent control in big cities, or maybe a limit on gas prices during an emergency. The idea is always to keep essential things affordable for people.
But, and this is a huge but, these things can really backfire. For price ceiling to actually do anything, it has to be set below the natural market price. And look at what that does on the graph. At that artificially low price, demand goes through the roof to QC. But suppliers, they're not making much money, so they cut back on supply, down to QC. So the policy which was meant to help ends up creating a massive ongoing shortage.
So if that's a ceiling, what's the opposite? You guessed it, a price floor. This is a legal minimum price. The two most famous examples are minimum wage laws, which is a price floor for labor, and agricultural programs that guarantee farmers a certain price for their crops. And just like ceilings, price floors can cause some real problems. If you set a price floor above what the market would naturally pay, you get a surplus. All of a sudden, sellers are thrilled to supply a ton at that guaranteed high price, but buyers just aren't interested in paying that much. This can lead to unsold agricultural products, or in the case of a minimum wage, a surplus of workers who can't find jobs at that wage. Okay, so let's boil this all down. What are the big things to remember? First, equilibrium. That's the market's natural happy place, where supply meets demand. Second, the invisible hand. That's the amazing way the market fixes itself when prices are too high or too low. And third, price controls. Things like ceilings and floors, even with the best intentions, can really mess with that natural balance and create those unintended consequences like shortages or surpluses.
And that really leaves us with the big, multi-trillion-dollar question, doesn't it? Now that you can see this invisible hand at work, when do we trust it to do its thing? And when do we feel we need to step in and give it a nudge? This is one of the most fundamental and ongoing debates in all of economics and politics. So, what do you think?